This is the Business Stuff Podcast. This is where I will share the lessons I've learned from advising thousands of businesses over almost 30 years. Each episode will give you practical insight to allow you to learn from other people's mistakes. I'll be pulling in experts from our team and the world of business, and together we'll make sure your business is giving you what you want. My name is Martin, and this is the Business Stuff Podcast. Hi, it's Martin from the Accelerator team. I'm here with Jack Spoor, and this week's episode is about...
It's all about perspective.
Perspective. Why are we talking about perspective, Jack, and what's the relevance to people in business?
Well, as you know, one of the jobs I do here is kind of focusing on strategy, helping businesses improve, grow, and just kind of, I suppose just be better.
Yeah.
And the way I do that is sometimes I do some workshops with people. I was sitting in a session a couple of weeks ago, and it was quite an interesting session because it was a team that I've been working with for a while. They've historically been felt very mistreated. They've been downtrodden, not fully appreciated as a team, and that kind of affected their self-esteem and how they behaved and how they acted with each other. So we've been doing a lot of work in terms of trying to improve their self-value, trying to make them feel better, feel like they're contributing more. And we've done a lot of stuff, but I was sat in that session and we've been working on this for the past 6, 7, 8 months, and it still felt like they hadn't quite shaken that attitude. Yeah. So that's when I kind of sat down and went, hang on a second, I don't think you fully appreciate where you started from 6 months ago. And we did an exercise. It's called the gap analysis. I think we may have talked about it before, where essentially you just measure where you think you are at the moment against
just the
where
difference
you want to
between
be.
2 points, isn't it?
And we did that exercise 6 months ago, and I went, well, let's roll it out again and see what happens. And it was amazing. Like, there was a 60% improvement, which they couldn't see because they were just still assuming on the here and now, and just being like, things are still not where I want them to be. It's not good enough. I'm not happy. But actually, after we did that exercise, I went, hang on, there's some clear data here.
We're not wasting the time. There's been clear evidence. Yeah,
and this isn't me like doing it. This is you marking it. So this is how you feel. So actually, and it was just amazing how that session kind of almost flipped on its head from them feeling a bit kind of downtrodden still, and a bit kind of, they still weren't feeling like they were contributing because they were frustrated with stuff, and then suddenly they felt a lot more positive, and we had such a great session off the back of that. So
So this reminds me of something that an old friend I had would talk about, the idea of brake fade. So you get a brand new car, the brakes are good. Mm-hmm. Touch the brakes, you stop. Yep. By the time it's ready for its first service, the brakes aren't as good, but it's happened so gradually you don't realise. Mm-hmm. So you've adapted your approach and you just press harder to get the same result. You get the car serviced, you get your new brake shoes on, you use the brakes the way you did, and you headbutt the steering wheel because they're now back to good again. Mm-hmm. And you didn't realise the decline, but once you then reset the position, you realise what a difference there was. It sounds like the team you're talking about didn't appreciate the improvements because they were gradual, incremental improvements.
Yeah. And
it was only then once you kind of took stock, had that reset, right? Or you measured, for want of a better word, then all of a sudden you realised. Is there a way to avoid that, or will that inevitably be the case that you'll always just not appreciate it unless you step back and measure the difference?
That's the importance, is actually taking that stock of appreciating and looking back. There's a Russian proverb, I'm going to surprise you here, we're getting very academic here, where it's along the lines of, I'm not going to give the literal translation.
I'll have it in the original Russian first, please, Jack.
Okay, prepared for us to be demonetized, if that's the thing. Essentially, it's along the lines of, if you have one eye on the past, you are blind in one eye. If you have both eyes on the future, you're blind in both eyes.
Right.
So it's an idea that if you're solely focusing on the future and not learning from the past, then you're completely blind to what's happening. You need to regularly take stock of what's happened, analyze, appraise what's happened, what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, and kind of really understand where you've come from.
So it's about putting it into context, isn't it?
Totally, yeah.
I know people who've been training for things and say, I'm not getting any faster, I'm not getting any stronger, I'm not getting any. And it's like, well, yeah, it's still hard today, but it's hard and you're lifting more. Mm-hmm. The race you did, you still finished and you were still exhausted. That's only because you're putting everything in. You were faster, and if you check your times, you realise that. Mm-hmm. So again, is it just, you can feel like you are still exhausted running 10k, but if you run it faster, you've still improved over being exhausted with the slow run, haven't you?
Yeah.
Is it just the measurement? Is the measurement enough to fix that issue then, or not? I can't quite word this, but had you been measuring the improvement in whatever the turnaround, the productivity, the whatever it was, then is there a chance that that team wouldn't have thought it was a waste of time?
I think there's an element of mindset as well in terms, or false perspectives about what change is. People assume that change is a destination. It's something that you get to, and then you can immediately kind of realise
solved it. Yeah, so they're like, well, why do we even still need to meet? Mm-hmm. We mustn't be getting anywhere because we're still meeting, mm-hmm. not realising that you're never there.
Yeah, it's
improvement never ends, does it?
It's small incremental improvements which will continue in perpetuity. It's not like you get to a point where you go, do you know what? I think we've cracked it.
We're perfect.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else we need to solve here. I think we're absolutely mint.
Yeah. Because
even if you get to a point where you're happy, you can't stand still. You have to constantly maintain. External factors happen that will kind of knock you off will make you have to react and change further. There's never a scenario where you're not thinking about change.
Is there a link here as well to, we talked a number of episodes ago about the saboteurs within and self-sabotage. Is there like a saboteur at work here, or it feels like there's like a personality issue here where you kind of go, well, that if you're like not an open mindset, if you're a closed mindset, if you're not a growth mindset, you like think, just what's the point?
There's probably a few at play. I can think of kind of like the hyperachiever side of people, where it's like you do something and it immediately, once you've done it, the value of what you've done is immediately it's completely devalued in your own mind because you're focusing on the next thing. There's also,
even though the result was still just as good, it's you're tricking yourself that it was of no value.
Yeah, exactly. Then there's also possibly the victim at play where things don't go to plan, and it's just like, oh, well, why is it always me? Why isn't it working? Why is it not going?
So why are we bothering? Yeah. So both of those would make you think, why are you bothering?
And then possibly the third one is probably like hyper anxiety, hyper anxious, where you're thinking about stuff that's going wrong constantly
instead of appreciating the things that have gone right.
You'll be focusing on the negative things. I mean, again, you could probably even argue that the stickler, the person who's always about controlling, focusing on that, and when you can't control it, and let's face it, when you're talking about change, there's a lot of things you can't control. So there's an element of that in there as well. So the point is that there's everyone's affected differently because everyone's got these different saboteurs and everyone reacts differently.
What can we do then to make sure that people are realising that their breaks are getting worse? What can we do to, I mean, is there something I've started doing, and it's not my idea, it's just like
I take credit for it.
Eventually doing the thing that everyone's been saying to do for years is. So I know with Graham RMD, I know we've got a thing where on Friday I just send him 3 things that went well that week. It sounds weird. Most people just think I'm infinitely positive. I'm mostly very positive. But I think it is still sometimes just worth having a way or a method where you can just go, well, I know it still feels hard, but here's a couple of things that went well.
Yeah.
Just to purposely make yourself realise what is working.
We talk about, and we've talked about it a lot, is the now, where, how model, where obviously you understand where you are at the moment against where you want to be, having that vision, very important, and from that you can understand, how you can get there. But within that now part of the things there's probably quite an important step that we may always sometimes overlook, is like, you're asking the question of where we are at the moment, but there probably needs to be a question asked after that where it's, and where have we come from since the last time we asked that question.
Where were we here?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we talk about the now, where, how. It's always a future thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the current and future. There's never there isn't a look back.
Yeah. Not readily. So again, it's important to build that into like your strategic thinking in terms of like, yeah, absolutely, taking that time out to really look back and see what things have improved.
It's interesting though, because there's another exercise that we do with people called stop, start, continue, which again, it's not our thing, and there's hundreds of variations of this, but where you say, well, what do we need to stop doing because it's disruptive or destructive? What do we need to start doing, and what should we continue? And often there's a whole load of things in the continue, and they're all the things that are going well, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's, like a third of what you do at least is probably going all right. So stop beating yourself up,
Yeah, definitely. And it's similar to what you do with Graham there in terms of like talking about the things that have gone well at that, at that point in time. It's another variation on that. So it's so much of this ultimately comes back to mindset. It's just like getting over in your own head that things are, although they're not where you want them to be, like they are moving in the right direction.
Is there a point here, Jack, as well, in that people don't know where they want to be, so they can't tell if they're getting closer to it?
Quite possibly, yeah.
So they know where they are now, and then they've started the how. And I don't know if we've done an episode on now, where, how. If I haven't, we'll do one. But they've started working on things without knowing what they're trying to achieve. So how will you ever know if you're getting there?
Yeah, you're right, and that's one of the biggest kind of errors that many people have when they kind of use this model is they get the orders wrong. So they they immediately jump to the how basically, and like, well, let's try to
fix a problem, but they don't know if it is because they don't know where the direction is. They don't know if it is a problem.
Yeah. And that's so important, is having that overarching vision of where you want to be and having those kind of guiding principles and those North Stars that you can use to ultimately make better business decisions that are fitting with your vision ultimately. And if you don't do that, then as you said, it's kind of quite rudderless, and you can be quite inconsistent in your decision making, and that's reflected in your progress.
Deflating in how people feel as well if they just don't know whether they're getting there. It even with people with a goal, then, Jack, it's important to break down the steps towards a goal, isn't it? So you might say, like, I don't know, rule the world. You've got to start locally, haven't you? You like run for some kind of local council, and then become an MP, then Prime Minister, then conquer your neighbours. Then and if you just say, well, we've got this massive rule the world, well, until you physically do it, you might feel like you haven't achieved any of the steps. Yeah. But if you break it down into bite-sized pieces, the old how do you eat an elephant? Well, a bite at a time. Yeah. Well, once a leg's gone, it's worth acknowledging that you've done that leg in, isn't it?
Yeah, and that. Within that scenario, like, you may be sitting as a local councillor when the aim to rule the world is like, I'm miles off, I'm nowhere near it. But actually go, well... But
at least you're a councillor now, and you weren't.
You weren't when you
were just shouting at the TV yesterday,
Yeah. It's a bit of a strange analogy. You
Not that I want to rule the world, but, to be honest, I'm just waiting for Elon to conquer Mars, and then I'm going to rule the galaxy. I think,
all right, Well, don't start too big, I suppose.
I'm not
too small, rather.
Proper plans, Jack. You got big plans.
Yeah.
So we've got saboteurs kicking us, kind of going, well, you're wasting your time. We've got people who don't know where they're going, so they don't know. We've got people who aren't measuring the output of their actions. So again, they haven't got that. If you're lifting weights, you pick the bigger weight up. You can see it's bigger. You've got instant feedback, haven't you? If you're just blindly feeling your way through things without knowing that you've achieved it, then again, there's issues. You got some people who are just negative anyway, who might just, doesn't matter what you do and how well you're doing.
Yeah, still not good enough.
They will just bring a negative attitude to things anyway.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in there? Have you got any other Russian proverbs we can drop on this to like?
Well, I think it's so much of it comes from just having access to tangible information to you that actually kind of backs up your feeling. Because again, like if go back to what we were talking about at the start, talking about that strategy group, is like they're running off gut feeling, they're running off the day-to-day and running off the last encounter they had, which may have not been a positive one. And
so it's also, you remember things different. I can't remember what this is now, but you remember and put your own slant on things that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So do we even know the thing that isn't working in the first place? It's like, I'll tell you the problem. It's like, but is that the actual problem? Or so again, if you're trying to work out where your now is and the problem you're trying to fix, you got to make sure you've got the right problem. Otherwise, you will never fix the underlying issue, will you?
Yeah, you'll fix symptoms potentially. You need to get to that root cause. And we've talked about in some of the change episodes that we've done where ultimately, how can you understand the impact of change if you don't know what it was like to start off with? And that point is still incredibly relevant. So just having access and start recording data to help you kind of back up and measure key metrics, I suppose, is just so important. And coming from a standing start, and we're experiencing this internally with some of the changes we're making, is like, you're not going to have automatic overnight success where the data you're going to start pulling together is perfect, because you're coming from a standing start and potentially you're measuring something that's quite important and quite, unwieldy.
Yeah.
The point is, though, you need to take the time out to start to put proper time into recording that information so you can actually look at it and go, all right, this is accurate. And now the decisions I make now, and if that affects that number, that metric, then I have some reliance that actually is because of the decision I made as opposed to something else that happened, or because there was some issue with the discrepancies in the numbers to start off with.
Is it worth covering off there that if you're trying to measure something, you've all got to agree that is the thing that should be measured?
Yeah.
Because within business, you might say, we've got productivity needs to be better. Mm-hmm. Right, okay, how are we going to measure that? Units sold. Well, is units sold in isolation the right thing, or is it units sold per person in the production team? Yeah. Or is it the sales team, or is it the sales channels? You've got to work out the right data as well, haven't you? Because again, if you're waiting time 4 hours in A&E, all right, we'll just move them from one bed to another, and then they've been seen, but the treatment hasn't started. Mm-hmm. You've got to agree the right measure, haven't you? And otherwise, people will just also play the measure. Yeah,
that's the danger of it, is that, if you have scenarios where people have scope to massage the numbers.
I want you to return answer every query in 48 hours. Done. Yeah. Right. Oh, but all you've said is, sorry, I haven't got back to you yet. Oh, I've replied though. Yeah, but that's not what we say. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have to be absolutely crystal clear in what the metric is, and that's half the battle, as well as working out and how can I actually accurately measure that with the information that we're collecting at the moment, or do we need to start collecting new sources of information and start recording them and start to manipulate them into a proper metric that is going to ultimately lead to something that's achievable as well.
Let's just assume you've got a group of people who can't agree that, then I kind of feel like I want to say like the 5 whys, but to work out what you should, what the problem is, it isn't always the surface problem. So there's this idea of the 5 whys. Why did that not happen? Oh, I was late. Why were you late? Oh, I slept in. Why did you sleep in? I didn't set the alarm. Why didn't you set the alarm? And the thing didn't not happen because you were late. It was because you went to bed at 4 o'clock because you were at the casino. There's problems always have other things causing them. Is it worth exploring? Is it worth covering off what I mean by that, so people kind of go, right, well, I've got the real problem now, and then we can really see if we're solving it.
Well, I think your example there kind of covered it off pretty well. So.
Right, well, we'll move on to the next thing.
No, it is very important, because you're right. You'll be constantly solving symptoms, as I said.
I'll get a better alarm clock. That wasn't the problem. The problem wasn't that you didn't hear the alarm; it was that you didn't set the alarm. Oh, it's like you're curing a symptom, aren't you?
And if as a leader or a manager of a team that's responsible for doing that, who are seen as the fixers, they will quickly lose credibility if they're fixing all of these things, but things aren't getting better. So people are going to be like, well, what's the point? You're trying your best, but it's not working. Why bother? It's not going to happen. and like people immediately start to kind of lose faith in the whole idea of fixing it.
Right, so Jack, we've got a team full of people. We're assuming here that they can all agree, they know what's going on, and we've got the right thing measured, all those things. But teams always disagree. Well, don't always, but teams can disagree, and they'll go, well, look, you're just still getting this wrong. Is there like an argument for saying, right, well, let's just have some kind of reset within that then, or
Yeah, you're right. There's
sure
often,
you can word that better than me.
There's often situations where you reach an impasse, and the natural instinct is to give up and go, no.
Because this might be one of the reasons why you might not be getting there. It might feel like you're not getting there, but there might be another reason why you're actually not getting there.
Yeah, and it's, as I said, you reach an impasse, and the instinct is to give up and go, it can't be fixed, and then just let it continue to be an issue. But this is where the importance of when you have like a really great team around you, where people have the confidence to speak out and disagree, have that. We say conflict, and conflict is generally used as a bad word, and you shouldn't possibly argue about stuff, but it's important to have that
robust debate.
Yeah. So you can actually talk about things and explore different ideas, challenge people, and then ultimately that's how change can be affected, when people are challenged on stuff. And from that point on, if you can have that robust debate, and even if people are still disagreeing, if those people can then be big enough to be like, okay, my idea is not going to be accepted, now I'm going to fully recommit to this idea.
Yeah.
And then go, not just leave that meeting, but then follow up on that meeting, continuing to recommit, and get to a point, where there's some evidence to suggest if things are working or not, and then you can go, okay, well, I've tried my best, I still don't think it's working. Here's the numbers and the data to back it up. Can we try this idea now?
Yeah.
But again, the temptation for people is to disagree, and happily to disagree, or maybe reluctantly disagree, and then openly disagree, and then that recommitting bit doesn't happen, even if.
So someone was talking, I can't remember who it was now, sorry, but there's this idea, actually it was an example I saw, it wasn't on the podcast, but there's an example of, we're trying to push something up a hill, pushing a boulder up the hill. Mm-hmm. And we're pushing, there's people watching kind of going, I'm not involved. You know who those people are, that's fine, you can try and get them involved. There's people at the other side of the boulder stopping you pushing up the hill, and you go, well, surely they're the biggest problem. You go, well, not really, because we've identified them and we know who they are. Mm-hmm. There's another group of people here, though. They're the people beside you with their hands on the boulder, but they're not pushing. They just look like they're with you. It's paying lip service, And then that's the reason why it's important you've got everyone's opinion clearly to make sure you know what's going on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we can go, right, we've all agreed that. Great. It's pointless if you go away and 3 people do nothing because they didn't agree, but just didn't tell you as well.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, everyone think that's going to work. Yeah, great. Oh, can't wait then. You get there and go, wonder why that didn't work. We all thought it was a good idea, didn't we? Oh, yeah, it was a great idea. It's like, so they've got their hands on, but they're just not putting any weight into it.
Yeah, a couple of things off that. So yeah, I mean, I've certainly experienced that myself, where I've done sessions before.
You've not been pushing, Jack, have you? You just
well, yeah, you come out and you go, that was a really good session, and then go back into the next one and nothing's happened. It's because
what
I
happened?
thought we agreed, and it was just like, oh yeah, but and nothing's happened. But then I kind of looked at that and went, am I just kind of steamrolling people here? Or am I going like, yeah, it's a great idea, let's do it, fantastic.
Just tell people what to do, or did we actually agree?
Yeah, so now I've kind of changed how I do things now, and I think it's really good to like, it's not I'm not actually asking anything different in my own head. Like, I've kind of flipped it on my head from, is everyone happy with that, to it when we agree something and everyone goes, yeah, or I actually ask, does anyone disagree? Because the idea then is like, that's...
So you're almost...
It's forcing people who do not agree with you to actually voice their opinion, because it's aimed specifically at that rather than...
So I've changed the question I ask at the end of if I'm with a client or with a prospect or even an internal or whatever. Instead of at the end going, is that everything? I go, is there anything we haven't yet answered? Mm-hmm. That kind of question. It's a different question altogether. It's the same it's the same direction. Are we done?
Mm-hmm.
But you ask it in a slightly different way, and you do get a different response.
Yeah,
Have I answered all of your queries is different to, is that us done?
Mm-hmm.
Because some people don't like to go, oh, he thinks we're done. I'll just say we're done.
It must be done.
Yeah, well, he must want rid of me. It's like, that's not what I said. It's like, so
but
yeah.
That's what I heard.
Sometimes just asking the same thing differently can make a big difference, can't it?
Yeah, and again, with that example, is like, again, he must have think we must agree. Everyone else is in agreement apart from me, so like, well, I better shut up. Yeah. But then, if you're asking specifically, then they're more likely to speak. I feel like that's really valuable. And then similarly, I think there is some...
Sorry, Jack, then, because also you can change the way you ask, but also ask everybody individually. Mm-hmm. So just go, right, everyone got that? Great.
Yeah.
Go, what do you think? Oh, you haven't said much. What do you think? Mm-hmm. Actually get it out.
Yeah.
Because not everyone's comfortable just jumping in either, are they?
Yeah, and it becomes... Again, it's holding them accountable for it as well, because it's like, this is your moment to say what you think. Do with it what you will. So... Again, if you just want to kind of fob me off and give me platitudes and go, yeah, that's fine, and then not do anything, I can then go back to you and go, well, you specifically said you were happy with this and you agreed to this and you haven't. Why not? Oh, because I didn't agree with it. Well,
we did ask you.
I did ask you specifically if you disagreed with me, and you said no. So again, it removes that. It provides mega accountability for them.
It's the accountability piece that helps there, isn't it? So yeah,
definitely.
I'm not sure how closely we are to the original topic here then, but the point was about making sure you take stock, having proper perspective, where you came from, where you're going, and where you are. You can only do that if you've got all the right people doing the right jobs, give everyone a chance to participate. The ones pushing the bowler down the hill, that's where you then say, look, we're going to have to stop and agree, we've got to go up or down, pick one. Yeah. And then we'll all get behind the right. So again, they're easy to spot. The people who you just feel like they're pulling, but they're not, we've discussed how we can change the approach there and get more feedback from those people, I think.
But I suppose the point of it, the fact that we've kind of, I wouldn't say digressed, but it just shows like how much stuff is interlinked and how quickly
you can realise that it's a good example of why were you late? I was at the casino. It's like 6 steps behind. Yeah. So actually we're trying to solve something here about perspective, and you quite easily end up talking about other stuff, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay then. Do you think there's a place for just having, good public information as well? Because I say public, available information, because a lot of businesses won't share things like, it's like, oh, we want to sell more units, right? Okay, how many did we sell?
You don't need to know that.
You just need to know it needs to be more. It's like, how many more? What's the sales weren't high enough. What were they? I've no idea what they were. Yeah, I mean, is there like, there are some easy wins, I suppose. What I'm getting at here, there are some easy wins here. You haven't got to track just all the complex, hard to measure things. Sometimes an easy metric is all it takes to let people see that progress, isn't it?
Yeah, and giving regular access for people to look at it in as close to real time as possible, having like a dashboard almost of the important metrics that people can see on a glance. Again, and then providing, if needed, providing that breakdown for them as well, so they understand, like, hang on a second, I can see that sales are down by 20%, but I secured this contract, like, that doesn't seem right. Can I look into the numbers?
Yeah.
And then might go, all right, I see, it wasn't because of me, it was because, actually, you're right, Jeff was off for 3 weeks and didn't make a sale. And
also you said a sale is when they've agreed the sale. Yeah. We class it as when it's delivered.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we actually measuring?
Yeah.
When is a job finished? Well, it depends, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay then. Well, listen, Jack, as always, it's good chatting.
Of course.
Perspective, some ideas to think about there. And some general ramblings, which we hope are of some use.
That's what we specialise in.
Yeah, a bit of general rambling. But as always, there's some interesting stuff there. We'll link back to any episodes. We mentioned the saboteurs as well. Saboteurs are great at making you think you didn't do it. So that might help. But also some basic measurements. I'm not sure if we've done it now. If we haven't, we'll come up with something so you know what we're talking about. But until the next episode, thanks very much. And thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Martin.